The chaos that followed wasn't a riot, it was a surgical extraction. Before my father could reach the stage, before his hands could grab the hem of my gown, 3 officers emerged from the side wings. I hadn't just filed a police report that morning. I had warned campus security that a suspended individual with an active warrant, Jax, would be in attendance. The sight was pathetic. My father, the man who had terrified me for 2 decades, was tackled to the ground in his expensive suit, screaming obscenities that echoed off the stadium walls. My mother stood frozen, clutching her pearl necklace as if it could protect her from the law, sobbing into the camera lens that was still broadcasting her downfall to the entire campus. And Jax, the golden boy, tried to run. He scrambled over the row of chairs, shoving a grandmother out of his way, only to be met by 2 campus police officers who didn't care about his potential. They cuffed him right there. This person knows how much of it might be truly pre-sale. I stood at the podium and watched. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just observed, cataloging the moment like evidence. The dean approached me, his face pale. "Miss Miller," he stammered. We had no idea." I reached into my bag and pulled out the binder, the dossier. 500 pages of bank statements, forged signatures, and the email thread conspiring to defraud me. "It's all in here, sir," I said, handing it to him. "Evidence for the academic dishonesty investigation you might want to open against my brother's previous transcripts, and a copy for the authorities." I took off my cap. I placed it on the podium. Then I walked down the stairs. The silence of the crowd had broken into a roar of confusion and shock. But as I walked down the center aisle, the students parted for me. No one said a word. They just looked at me with a mixture of terror and respect. I walked past my mother as an officer read her rights. She looked up at me, her mascara running, her face twisted in a mask of betrayal. "We gave you life," she screamed, her voice cracking. "How could you do this to your own blood?" I stopped. I turned to her one last time. "You didn't give me a life," I said calmly. "You gave me a debt, and today I paid it off." I kept walking. I walked out of the stadium, out of the gates, and into the waiting Uber I had called 10 minutes ago. I threw my phone, the one on their family plan, into a trash can on the way out. I didn't go back to my apartment. My bags were already packed. My new bank accounts were secure. My flight to Chicago, where my new job and my new life waited, left in 3 hours. That was 6 months ago. Today, I live in a condo with a view of the lake. The lawsuit is ongoing, but my parents are too busy fighting criminal fraud charges to bother me. Jax is awaiting trial for assault and embezzlement. The Miller family legacy is dead, buried under legal fees and public shame. I changed my number. I'm in the process of legally changing my name. Slow Miller is a ghost now. Sometimes, late at night, I check my credit score. It's slowly climbing back up, point by point. It's a slow process, but every point represents something they can never touch again. Freedom. They say you can't choose your family. That's true, but you can choose to fire them. I didn't lose a family that day. I gained a future. And if you're listening to this, sitting in the dark wondering if you have the strength to cut the cord, take it from me. Strike first, strike hard, and don't look back. To understand why I was about to detonate a nuclear bomb on my own family's reputation, you have to understand the architecture of the Miller household. It was a simple, brutal hierarchy. At the top sat Jax, the sun around which our entire universe revolved. Below him were my parents, his devoted worshippers, and somewhere in the dirt, buried beneath the foundation, was me. I wasn't a daughter. I was an insurance policy. Jax was the golden child. He was 3 years older, charming, handsome, and completely useless. He wrecked his first car at 17. Dad bought him a newer one. He failed out of state college after 1 semester. Mom blamed the professors and welcomed him home with a mental health party. He had potential. He had vision. I had obligations. From the moment I turned 16, I was the ghost child. If I was in the room, I was invisible unless something needed to be cleaned, fixed, or paid for. I got straight A's not because they cared, but because scholarships meant they didn't have to waste money on my tuition. Money that was earmarked for Jax's ventures, a DJ career that lasted 2 weeks, a crypto scam that lost them 20 grand, a landscaping business where he didn't own a lawnmower. My role was simple, the cash cow. I got my first job at a diner the day I turned 16. My parents sat me down and gave me a speech about contributing to the household. They took 80% of my paycheck. They called it room and board. I called it the Jax tax. For years, I handed over greasy envelopes of cash, watching them funnel it directly into Jax's pockets for designer sneakers and bottle service. But they made one critical mistake. They thought that because I was quiet, I was stupid. They didn't know that I wasn't just studying forensic accounting at the library until midnight. I was practicing. I was working. By my sophomore year of college, I wasn't just a student. I was a freelance auditor for small businesses who suspected their partners of embezzlement. I had a knack for finding hidden money. I could smell a lie in a ledger from a mile away. While my parents thought I was scraping by on a cafeteria meal plan, I was quietly building a fortress. I opened a separate bank account under a shell LLC that I formed online. I funneled my consulting fees, which were substantial, into high-yield index funds and tech stocks. I didn't buy clothes. I didn't buy cars. I bought my freedom, dollar by dollar. To them, I was Sloan, the broke student living on ramen, desperate for their approval. In reality, I had a net worth that already eclipsed my father's retirement fund, but I played the part. I wore the worn-out sneakers. I drove the beat-up Honda Civic. I let them lecture me about financial responsibility while they drowned in credit card debt to fund their country club lifestyle. I let them believe they held the power, because I knew something they didn't. In my line of work, you don't strike when you find the first discrepancy. You wait. You let the target get comfortable. You let them think they're getting away with it. You collect every receipt, every forged signature, every lies until you have a mountain of evidence so heavy it will crush them instantly. I was biding my time, waiting for graduation to cut ties and disappear. I was going to ghost them. Just walk away and never look back. But then, last week happened, and I realized that simply leaving wasn't enough. They didn't just want my money anymore, they wanted my life. The first notes of Pomp and Circumstance echoed through the stadium speakers. It's a song that is supposed to signify triumph, the culmination of 4 years of hard work. But as I marched in line with the other graduates, my gown rustling against my legs, it sounded different to me. It sounded like the slow, rhythmic ticking of a clock counting down to 0. I walked past the sea of families. I saw fathers crying, mothers waving oversized signs, siblings cheering. The air was thick with unconditional love and pride. It felt like I was walking through a foreign country where I didn't speak the language. Then I reached the front. My parents were sitting exactly where they said they would be. Front row, center, prime real estate for the execution they had planned. My father was sitting with his legs crossed, looking relaxed, the earlier panic completely gone now that he thought he had won. He caught my eye as I passed. He didn't smile. He just tapped his index finger against the face of his Rolex. Time is ticking, Sloan. My mother was busy taking a selfie, angling the camera so the stage was in the background. She captioned it. I could practically see the letters forming in the air. Proud Mama Bear. She was building the narrative of the perfect family right up until the last second. And Jax, he was asleep, sunglasses on, head tipped back, mouth slightly open. He didn't care. He never had to care about anything, because I was the one who always cleaned up the mess. I felt a strange sensation wash over me. It wasn't fear. It wasn't sadness. It was clarity. For 22 years, I had been afraid of them. I was afraid of their shouting, afraid of their disappointment, afraid of the financial leash they kept around my neck. I had let them turn me into a ghost in my own life. But as I placed my foot on the first step of the stage, that fear evaporated. Step. I remembered the 16th birthday they forgot because Jax had a hangover. Step. I remembered the night I worked a double shift at the diner to pay for the car insurance, only to find out they had used the money for a weekend trip to Vegas. Step. I remembered the credit report, the $250,000 anchor they had tied to my ankles to drown me so Jax could float. I reached the top of the platform. The stadium lights were blinding, turning the audience into a dark, hazy mass. The dean stood there, beaming, his hand extended. "Our valedictorian," he announced, his voice booming. "Sloan Miller, a bright future ahead." I shook his hand. "Thank you, Dean," I said, my voice steady. "It certainly will be." I walked to the podium. The microphone waited like a loaded weapon. I placed my binder on the stand. It wasn't the speech I had submitted for approval 2 weeks ago. It was a new one, the real one. I looked out into the darkness. I found the front row. My father sat up straighter. He gave me a sharp warning look, a look that said, "Stick to the script." He thought I was pausing because I was nervous. He thought I was remembering his threat. He was right. I was remembering it. "I will humiliate you in front of everyone." I gripped the sides of the podium. The wood felt cool under my palms. I took a breath, letting the oxygen fill my lungs, fueling the fire that was about to burn this entire charade to the ground. I locked eyes with him, and for the first time in my life, I didn't blink. I stood at the podium, my hands gripping the polished wood so hard my knuckles turned white. Below me, a sea of black caps and gowns rippled like a dark ocean. Thousands of people were watching. The dean was waiting for me to begin the valedictorian speech. But I wasn't looking at the dean. I wasn't looking at my classmates. I was staring directly at the front row, reserved seating. There they were, my parents. My mother, wearing a pastel dress that probably cost more than my entire freshman year tuition. My father, fixing his tie, looking like the pillar of the community. And squeezed between them, looking bored and hungover, was my older brother Jax, the golden boy, the one who had failed out of 3 colleges but still drove a Porsche. To the rest of the world, they looked like a proud family, supporting their high-achieving daughter. They were smiling. They were clapping. But I knew the truth. My phone, hidden in the pocket of my graduation gown, buzzed against my hip. I didn't need to look at it to know who it was. It was a text from my father. I knew exactly what it said because he had whispered it into my ear right before I walked on stage. "Stick to the script, Sloan. Don't embarrass us. And remember, the transfer papers are in a call. You sign them the second this is over, or we ruin you." They didn't come here to celebrate my degree in forensic accounting. They came to make sure their cash cow didn't escape the slaughterhouse. They thought they had me cornered. They thought fear would keep me silent, just like it had for 22 years. I looked at my mother. She blew me a kiss. A cold, sharp laugh bubbled up in my throat, but I swallowed it down. They had no idea. They thought they were watching a graduation, but they were actually attending their own funeral. I took a deep breath, leaned into the microphone, and let the silence stretch just long enough to make them uncomfortable. I smiled. It was the sharpest thing I had ever worn. "Good morning, class of 2024, I said, my voice booming through the stadium speakers. "Faculty, friends, and family." I paused. I looked down at my parents. My father nodded once, a sharp jerk of his chin. "Good girl. Keep going." "We are often told that graduation is a time to look forward," I continued. "But today, I want to look back. I want to talk about the cost of success. We all paid a price to be here. Tuition, sleepless nights, sacrifice." I leaned closer to the mic. The feedback whined slightly, a high-pitched warning. "But some prices are hidden. Some costs are stolen." My father's smile faltered. He uncrossed his legs. "I want to take a moment to recognize my parents, Robert and Linda Miller, sitting in the front row." I pointed at them. The jumbo screen above the stage cut to a live feed of their faces. They beamed, waving at the camera, soaking up the attention. "And my brother, Jax. You told me today," I said, my tone darkening, "that I am an investment. You told me that I owed you." I opened the binder. I didn't look at the audience anymore. I looked only at the camera lens that was broadcasting this speech to the overflow rooms and the live stream online. So I applied my degree. I did a full audit of the Miller family ledger, and I think the world should know the results. The stadium went quiet, the kind of quiet where you can hear a pin drop. I'd like to thank my parents for opening 5 credit cards in my name without my consent, I said, my voice crystal clear. For forging my signature on 3 private loans totaling $250,000. A gasp rippled through the crowd like a shockwave. On the big screen, my mother's wave froze in midair. My father stood up, his face turning a violent shade of purple. "Sloan," he shouted. It was fate without a microphone, but I heard it. "Stop this! Cut the mic!" I didn't stop. I spoke faster, sharper. "I'd like to thank you for using that stolen money not for my education, but to pay a settlement to the victim of the assault my brother committed on November 14th of last year." The crowd erupted. Whispers turned into shouts. Jax, who had been half asleep, jolted awake as the camera zoomed in on his terrified face. "That's a lie!" my father roared, shoving a security guard who tried to calm him down. "She's lying! She's mentally unstable!" "I have the bank transfers, Dad," I said, holding up the documents. "I have the IP logs tracing the fraud back to your home office. I have the email you sent to your lawyer yesterday, conspiring to blackmail me into assuming this debt under duress. I have the bank transfers," my dad said, holding up the documents. I turned to the dean, who looked horrified, paralyzed between stopping me and hearing the truth. "I'm not signing your liability papers," I said, turning back to the screaming man in the front row. "I am not your retirement plan, and I am not your scapegoat." My father was climbing over the railing now, his face twisted in pure animalistic rage. "You ungrateful little witch, I'll kill you. You wanted a return on your investment, I asked," my voice cold as ice. "Here it is." I looked directly into the camera, knowing the live stream was recording everything for the police report I had already filed. I resigned from this family, effective immediately. 7 days ago, the timeline shifted. I was sitting in my usual corner of the university library, the one with the flickering fluorescent light that kept everyone else away. I wasn't studying. I was doing what I did every quarter, running a comprehensive background check on myself. In my field, your financial reputation is your lifeblood. You can't be a forensic accountant with a messy ledger. I expected to see the usual, a pristine credit score, my student loans paid down significantly by my secret income, and 0 red flags. Instead, the screen flashed red. My credit score hadn't just dipped, it had flatlined. It was sitting in the low 400s, says. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I clicked into the details, my fingers flying across the keyboard. It had to be a mistake, a glitch, identity theft by some stranger in Russia or China. But the IP addresses didn't trace back to Moscow. They traced back to a 4-bedroom colonial house in the suburbs. My parents' house. I sat there frozen as the list of liabilities scrolled down the screen. It was a horror show of financial malpractice. 3 massive private loans totaling $250,000. 5 maxed out credit cards opened in my name. And a pending application for a second mortgage on a property I didn't own, but apparently I was the guarantor for. I dug deeper. I accessed the digital signatures. Sloan Miller. Sloan Miller. Sloan Miller. The handwriting was a clumsy attempt at mine, shaky and hesitant, my mother's handwriting. I felt nauseous, but then the auditor in me took over. The part of me that dissected fraud for a living pushed the panic aside and replaced it with cold, hard curiosity. Where did the money go? It didn't take long to find the paper trail. My parents weren't master criminals, they were just desperate narcissists. I found the transfers. The money hadn't gone to medical bills or emergency repairs. It had gone to a law firm, a specialized defense firm, and a settlement fund. Jax, 6 months ago, while I was pulling all-nighters studying for finals, Jax had apparently gotten into a bar fight that put a guy in the ICU. To keep him out of prison and keep the story out of the papers, my parents had bought the victim's silence. And they had paid for it by selling my future. They stole my identity to pay for his freedom. But the final knife in the back wasn't the theft. It was the email I found in my father's outbox. I guessed his password years ago. It was Jax1998 Prime. He had emailed their family lawyer with a subject line that made my blood run cold. Graduation strategy. The email read, "She's naive. We'll tell her the documents are just standard tax forms for her new job. Once she signs the assumption of liability, the debt is legally hers, and our credit is clean again. She won't read it. She trusts us. They were planning to ambush me. At graduation, they weren't coming to watch me walk. They were coming to hand me the bill for my brother's sentence. They were going to smile, hand me a bouquet of flowers, and then trick me into signing my life away before the ink on my diploma was even dry." I closed my laptop. The hum of the library felt deafening. Most people would have called the police right then. Most people would have called screaming. I did it. I walked to the University Print Center. I didn't buy a graduation dress. I bought a high-capacity binder. I didn't make a dinner reservation. I spent the next 6 days compiling a dossier thicker than a phone book. If they wanted to talk business at my graduation, fine, we would talk business. But I wasn't going to be the one signing papers. I was going to be the one serving them. The ambush happened 30 minutes before the ceremony. I was standing near the faculty entrance, adjusting my cap, when I felt a hand grip my upper arm. Not a hug, a restraint. It was my father. Up close, the proud dad mask was already slipping. His eyes were hard, bloodshot. He smelled of stale coffee and expensive cologne, the scent of a man trying desperately to cover up a panic attack. "There you are," he said, his voice tight. "We need to handle the paperwork. Now." He steered me toward their SUV, parked illegally in a loading zone. My mother was waiting by the open trunk, holding a thick manila envelope. Jax was leaning against the bumper, vaping, scrolling through TikTok, looking bored out of his mind. He didn't even look up when I approached. "You look nice, Sloan," my mother said, her voice brittle. She didn't look at my face. She looked at the folder in my father's hand. "Now, this is just a formality. We opened a trust in your name to help with your student loans. We just need to transfer the legal title to you so the bank doesn't freeze the assets." She held out a pen. Her hand was shaking. I looked at the document. It wasn't a trust fund. It was a debt assumption agreement. It was a legal grenade that would transfer $250,000 of fraudulent debt from their names directly to mine. It would clear their credit and destroy mine before I even accepted my diploma. I should read this first," I said, playing the part of the confused, obedient daughter. "Maybe I can take it home and—" "No," Jack said, finally looking up. He blew a cloud of strawberry vapor into my face. "Just sign the paper, Sloan. God, why do you have to make everything so difficult? I have a party to get to." "Jax, quiet," my father snapped. He turned back to me, and the pretense of kindness vanished. He stepped into my personal space, using his height to loom over me. "Listen to me closely. You are going to sign this right now. If you don't, we go straight to the dean." "The dean?" I asked, keeping my voice trembling. "We tell him you plagiarized your thesis," my mother interjected, smoothing her skirt. "We tell him we wrote it for you. We have the emails faked, of course, but convincing enough to trigger an investigation. You won't walk. You won't graduate, and that job you lined up, they'll rescind the offer the second you're under academic review." I stared at them. The sheer audacity was breathtaking. They were willing to burn my entire academic career to the ground just to save themselves. "You're an investment, Sloan," my father hissed, shoving the clipboard against my chest. "We paid for your food, your roof. It's time to pay out. Sign it." I looked down at the paper. Then I looked at the stadium entrance. The procession music was starting to play faintly in the distance. "I can't sign it here," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "My hands are shaking too much. I need to walk first. Let me get the diploma. Once I have it, I'll sign everything. I promise." My father hesitated. He looked at my mother. She checked her watch. "Fine," he spat, "but we'll be in the front row, watching you. If you pull anything, if you even look at us wrong, I'll stand up and object during the ceremony. Do you understand? I will humiliate you in front of—" "No," I said. Jax laughed, flicking his vape pen at my gown. "Good dog." I turned and walked away, clutching my cap. As soon as I turned the corner out of their sight, my face settled into stone. They thought they had terrified me into submission. They didn't realize they had just given me the perfect motive for what I was about to do.